guilty?
I don't know that they're guilty, but I believe that there's the potential there. I think one of the things that surprised me the most about this case was when I found out there'd been a murder, I wasn't surprised. And usually when you hear that there's a murder of someone you know, I mean, there's shock, et cetera, but I wasn't surprised.
Were you surprised when the family was fingered as the potential suspects?
No.
Why not?
This is hard for me to talk about, but I think it's also very important to talk about it. I have a different perspective. I observed some things when I was working for the company, and specifically when Nedra Paul and Paulette Davis, Patsy's sister, were working for me in Atlanta, that led me to suspect that there was a lot of dysfunction occurring in this family that potentially could lead to something that would be very bad.
Examples?
Well, I think one of the examples was one of the employees told me that Nedra and Paulette had been talking to the other employees about the size of John Ramsey's son's private parts, and were almost acting like it was a badge of honor. And I don't think that's appropriate.
The 10-year-old kid's penis?
In the quiet, affluent town of Boulder, Colorado, a crime unfolded that would capture and horrify a nation, creating a mystery that has now haunted us for nearly 3 decades. It's a case that has become a dark fixture in our collective memory, a story told and retold in documentaries, books, and endless speculation. The murder of 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey on Christmas night of 1996 left behind a trail of bizarre clues, a family shattered by suspicion, and a ghost in the American psyche. For 28 years, that ghost has haunted the Ramsey house and the cold case files of the Boulder Police Department. An unknown figure without a name, a shadow without a face. We've seen false confessions, grand jury decisions that went nowhere, and decades of dead ends that left a grieving father to fight for answers on his own. But what if the truth isn't buried in the past, but waiting in the future? What if a massive leap in forensic technology means the suspect's own family could be the key to finally revealing his identity? After 28 years of silence, science may be on the verge of making the ghost in this story speak. This isn't just about another look at old evidence. It's an entirely new way of examining it. We're talking about familial DNA, a technology so powerful it has already solved some of the most infamous cold cases in history, and now its sights are being set on the JonBenet Ramsey mystery. This is the story of how a genetic revolution, a father's relentless push for answers, and the legacy of a determined detective are coming together to potentially unmask a man who has walked free for a generation. To really get the weight of this potential breakthrough, we have to go back to the bitter cold of December 26, 1996. The Ramsey home on 15th Street in Boulder should have been a place of Christmas recovery. Presents were unwrapped the day before, filled with holiday chaos and joy. But in the pre-dawn hours, that peace was shattered for good. At 5:52 a.m., Patsy Ramsey, JonBenet's mother, made a frantic, disoriented 911 call. Her voice, thick with panic, reported that her daughter was gone and she'd found a ransom note on the back staircase.
That note would become one of the most bizarre and dissected pieces of evidence in modern crime. It was incredibly long, almost 3 full pages of a notepad found inside the house. The writer, claiming to be a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction, demanded a very specific ransom, $118,000. That amount was almost identical to a recent work bonus John Ramsey, a successful businessman, had received. The note was also peppered with quotes from movies like Dirty Harry and Speed, and warned the Ramseys not to call the police. But they already had. The initial response from the Boulder Police Department has since been widely seen as a catastrophic failure. Instead of sealing off the house as a potential homicide scene, officers allowed friends and family to come and go. John Ramsey left to get the mail. A friend helped clean the kitchen. In those crucial first hours, the entire crime scene, the house itself, was hopelessly contaminated. Police and others moved around freely, potentially destroying or smudging critical forensic evidence. For hours, Everyone thought it was a kidnapping. The FBI was called, and they started prepping for the ransom drop. But the call from the kidnappers never came. As the day wore on, the dread and confusion in the house grew. Then, in the afternoon, a detective named Linda Arndt asked John Ramsey and a family friend, Fleet White, to search the house one more time from top to bottom, just to see if anything seemed out of place.
That search led John Ramsey to a place that had somehow been missed for hours, the basement. He went into a small, windowless room, often called the wine cellar, and there, in the dark, he made the discovery that would turn a nation's horror into a permanent scar. Lying on the floor, wrapped in her white blanket, was the body of his 6-year-old daughter. She wasn't kidnapped, she had been in the house the whole time. The discovery inside the Ramsey home left investigators puzzled. Black duct tape was found across JonBenet's mouth, and her wrists had been bound with a white cord above her head. Nearby lay a garrote fashioned from the same cord and part of a broken paintbrush handle traced back to her mother, Patsy. Officials later noted both the cord and the unusual device in their final report, details that continue to raise questions to this day. Finding the body in the house, combined with that bizarre ransom note written on a pad from the house with a pen from the house, immediately changed the focus of the investigation. The idea of a random intruder suddenly seemed a lot less likely to the investigators on scene. The umbrella of suspicion, as it was later called, fell right on top of the two people who were there with her, her parents, John and Patsy Ramsey. The problem was clear. A child was murdered in her own home, but the investigation was so chaotic from the start, and the evidence so contradictory, that the path to the truth seemed to splinter in a dozen different directions. The immediate aftermath wasn't a time of clarity. It was the start of a long, agonizing slide into a swamp of suspicion, media frenzy, and investigative deadlock. The Boulder Police Department, a relatively small force, not used to this kind of high-profile, complex case, quickly zeroed in on the family. That isn't unusual. When a tragedy happens inside the home, statistics often point first to those closest to the family. But here, the focus became so intense it created a kind of tunnel vision that plagued the case for years. The media storm that hit Boulder was like nothing before. JonBenet, a former Little Miss Colorado, was incredibly photogenic. Videos from her child beauty pageants played on a loop, and her made-up face and costumes created a controversial image that fueled endless and often disturbing speculation. The narrative hardened fast: a pageant mom and a wealthy, distant father. The public, fed a steady diet of leaks, had basically convicted the Ramseys in the court of public opinion. Every move they made, from hiring lawyers and private investigators to their initial hesitation to sit for formal police interviews without a lawyer, was seen through a lens of guilt. This created the first major wall, the hostile relationship between the Ramseys and the Boulder police. The police saw the family's lawyers as obstruction. The Ramseys, convinced they were being framed while the true culprit was overlooked, lost faith in the very people who were supposed to uncover the truth. This deadlock allowed two competing theories of the crime to take hold. The intruder theory and the family theory became warring camps that defined the case for decades. On the intruder theory side, the evidence was significant. The most powerful piece was the DNA. A small amount of DNA from an unknown male was found in JonBenet's underwear and under her fingernails. Years later, more advanced touch DNA tests found the same genetic profile on the waistband of her long johns. This DNA didn't match John, his son Burke, or anyone in the family. Remains the single most compelling piece of forensic evidence suggesting an unknown person was in the house. Plus, there was a broken basement window, a suitcase placed under it like a step, and a scuff mark on the wall nearby, all pointing to a possible entry point. The shocking complexity of the scene, from the unusual nodding to other troubling signs, led many to believe this looked more like the work of an outsider with darker intentions than a parent who lost their temper. On the other hand, the family theory was fueled by the sheer weirdness of the crime scene. The ransom note was the star of this theory. It was written on a Ramsey notepad with a Ramsey pen. Some forensic linguistics experts noted its unusual style, and some pointed to Patsy Ramsey, whose handwriting had some similarities, though a definitive match was never made. The $118,000 demand just seemed too specific to be a coincidence. Then there was the pineapple. An autopsy showed JonBenet had recently eaten pineapple, but her parents couldn't remember giving her any. A bowl of pineapple with a spoon in it was found in the kitchen with Patsy's and her son Burke's fingerprints on it. This suggested a late-night snack, a domestic moment that didn't fit the family's timeline. These conflicting facts created a perfect storm of confusion. For every clue pointing to an intruder, another pointed back at the family. In 1998, the case went to a grand jury, which after 13 months voted to indict John and Patsy on charges of neglect, resulting in death. But the district attorney at the time, Alex Hunter, refused to sign the indictment, believing there wasn't enough evidence to get a conviction. He famously said, "I and my prosecution task force believe we do not have sufficient evidence to warrant the filing of charges." The indictment was sealed for years, leaving the Ramseys in a public and legal limbo. Years turned into a decade. The case got colder, only broken up by bizarre, headline-grabbing twists. The biggest was in 2006, with the confession of John Mark Carr, a teacher arrested in Thailand. Carr claimed he was with JonBenet when she died. For a moment, it seemed like the case was solved. He was flown back to the U.S. in a media circus. But it all fell apart. His story was full of holes, and crucially, his DNA didn't match the unknown male profile. Then, in 2008, a huge turning point. Boulder District Attorney Mary Lacey, using new, more sensitive DNA testing, wrote a formal letter to John Ramsey, publicly exonerating him, Patsy, who had died from cancer 2 years earlier, and their son Burke. Lacey stated that the DNA evidence pointed to an unexplained third party, and the family was no longer considered suspects. It was a stunning official reversal. But while it was a personal vindication, the cloud of suspicion never fully lifted for some, including a handful of experts who felt the DNA alone wasn't enough to close the book on other possibilities. The case was colder than ever. The DNA profile of unknown male 1 inch was in the national database CODIS, but it never matched anyone. The intruder, if he existed, had vanished, leaving only a wall of frustration that seemed, for a long time, impossible to break through. For more than 2 decades, the whole case has hinged on a ghost in the machine, the DNA of unknown male 1. It was the most scientific, most objective piece of evidence in the whole investigation, and for years, it was also the most frustrating. So what exactly was this evidence? The key sample was a trace amount of DNA found in JonBenet's underwear. When it was first tested in 1997, DNA technology was still developing. Labs created a profile based on about 13 specific locations, or loci, on a person's DNA strand to create a unique genetic fingerprint. That profile of unknown male 1 was run through the FBI's CODIS database, which contains DNA from convicted felons and unsolved crimes. The hope was simple: run the profile, get a hit, find the culprit. But it never happened. Year after year, nothing.
This told investigators something important. The person who left that DNA probably wasn't a convicted felon with a profile on file. The DNA proved someone else was there, but it couldn't tell you who. It was a lock without a key. As technology got better, the evidence was re-examined. In the 2000s, touch DNA became a real tool, allowing labs to get a profile from just a few skin cells left on an object. When JonBenet's long johns were retested this way, the same profile of unknown male 1 was found on the waistband. This was huge. It strengthened the intruder theory because it put the unknown man's DNA on 2 separate pieces of her clothing. This made the chance of it being random contamination, say from a factory worker, much, much lower. While a few experts have questioned if innocent transfer could be the source, The prevailing view is that this DNA is forensically significant.
This was the evidence that led to the Ramsey family's official exoneration in 2008. District Attorney Mary Lacey believed the repeated presence of this profile had to point to the person responsible. But even with stronger evidence, the basic problem was the same. The profile was just an anonymous string of genetic markers. The limitation of the tech was the problem. A CODIS profile is like a genetic license plate. If police have the number, they can run it through the DMV database to get a name. But if that plate isn't in the system, it's just a meaningless string of characters. You can't use it to find out who the driver's cousins are. You can only look for an exact match.
For 20 years, this was the wall. The DNA was a powerful clue that pointed away from the family, but it pointed toward a total unknown. It was a paradox. The strongest physical evidence was also the source of the investigation's biggest dead end. The case was stuck, waiting for a scientific revolution that few could have imagined.
For decades, the DNA strategy in the Ramsey case was about finding one needle in a giant haystack. It all relied on the hope that the culprit's exact DNA profile was already in a criminal database. But then a totally new approach came along, one that doesn't just look for the needle, but for the needle's relatives. This is the science of investigative genetic genealogy, or IgG. Think of it like a 23andMe for a cold case. The revolution started with consumer ancestry tests. Companies like Ancestry DNA and 23andMe got millions of us to spit in a tube to find our ethnic origins and long-lost cousins. To do this, they don't just look at 13 or 20 genetic markers like old forensic tests. They analyze up to 1 million different markers, which creates an incredibly rich genetic profile. Many people then choose to upload their raw DNA data to public genealogy websites like GEDmatch to expand their search for relatives. In doing so, they accidentally created a game-changing tool for law enforcement. Investigators realized that if they could create a similar detailed profile from crime scene DNA, they could upload it to these public databases and search for relatives of the unknown suspect. That's the core of IgG. Instead of looking for an exact match, genealogists look for partial matches, people who share significant chunks of DNA with the suspect. They might not find the culprit, but they could find his second cousin. And once they have a relative, the real work starts.
Expert genetic genealogists take that match and start building a family tree using public records like birth certificates, census data, and obituaries. They work backwards to find the common ancestors that the suspect shares with these known relatives. Then, they build the family tree forward, identifying all of the descendants. This can create a list of dozens, or even hundreds, of potential people. The final step is old-fashioned police work. Investigators take that list and start eliminating people. Women, people who were too young or already dead at the time of the crime, or people who lived across the country. The goal is to narrow it down to a few credible names. Then, police can try to get a DNA sample from that person, maybe from a discarded coffee cup, for a direct comparison. If it matches, they've got their guy. This technique proved itself in 2018 with the arrest of one of the most notorious serial predators in American history, the Golden State Killer. For over 40 years, his DNA was in CODIS but never matched anyone. Investigators used IgG, uploaded his profile to GEDmatch, found distant relatives, built a massive family tree, and narrowed their search to a 72-year-old former police officer named Joseph James D'Angelo. It was a perfect match. Case solved.
Suddenly, the floodgates opened. IgG has since been used to solve hundreds of cold cases. This is why the genetic revolution is such a game changer for the JonBenet Ramsey case. That central piece of evidence, the DNA of unknown male 1, is the perfect candidate. IgG provides a way to bypass the limitations of the CODIS system. Investigators no longer need the culprit to be a convicted felon. They just need one of his relatives anywhere in the world to have taken a DNA test and uploaded it to a public database. The ghost that has been silent for 28 years might finally be connected to a family tree, and every branch of that tree leads investigators one step closer to giving that ghost a name.
Having this powerful new technology is one thing. Actually, getting it used is another. For years, John Ramsey was vocal about his frustration with the Boulder Police Department, feeling they were reluctant to embrace these cutting-edge methods. He argued that the technology to solve his daughter's murder exists, and it was unthinkable not to use it. For a long time, it felt like a one-sided battle.
But in recent years, there's been a shift. Following leadership changes, the Boulder Police have expressed a new commitment to solving the case. In late 2023, they announced a cold case review panel, bringing in experts from the FBI and other agencies. They began the huge task of digitizing over 1 million pages of documents, and crucially, they are now re-examining evidence with modern DNA methods. While there's no public confirmation of new leads from this testing, we know the work is underway. Items like the garrote used on JonBenet, which the Ramsey team has long pushed to be tested for touch DNA, are part of this renewed effort. It's a significant thaw in a case that was frozen for years, but the official investigation isn't the only front in this fight. There's a parallel, independent investigation driven by the legacy of one of the case's most steadfast detectives, Lou Smith.
Smith was a legendary homicide detective who was coaxed out of retirement in 1997 to help with the case. After meticulously reviewing the evidence, he came to a firm conclusion that went against the prevailing police theory. He was convinced the family was innocent and an intruder was responsible. Until his death from cancer in 2010, Smith dedicated his life to solving JonBenet's murder. He gathered a massive amount of information, chasing down leads and compiling his findings into what his family now calls his secret spreadsheet. This spreadsheet is his life's work, a database of hundreds of potential suspects with notes, evidence, and timelines. Today, that work is being continued by his daughter, Cindy Mara, and a team of volunteer investigators. They are methodically working through the names on that spreadsheet, but with a tool Lou Smith never had: DNA. They have been tracking down individuals from Smith's list and comparing their DNA against the unknown male 1 profile. According to Mara, they've already eliminated dozens of people, narrowing the field of potential suspects. This creates a powerful, two-pronged attack. On one side, you have law enforcement, now reevaluating evidence and exploring IgG. On the other, you have a private team armed with a legendary detective's knowledge and the same cutting-edge science. John Ramsey has actively supported this private effort, helping to fund the expensive DNA analysis. He believes this forensic genealogy effort, whether by police or Smith's team, represents the best and perhaps final hope of identifying the man who killed his daughter.
For 28 years, the story of JonBenet Ramsey has been a story of questions. Who wrote the note? How did the culprit get in? And most importantly, who was the man who left his DNA at the scene? For decades, the answers have been buried under speculation, misinformation, and heartbreakingly slow science. But today, the ground is shifting. The science is finally catching up. Technology now exists that could potentially generate a suspect's name from a genetic family tree. We know that critical items of evidence are being re-examined with technology that is exponentially more powerful than anything from 1996. We know a dedicated team is poring over a brilliant detective's life's work using that same technology to hunt for a culprit. The silent witness, the DNA of unknown male 1, is no longer a guaranteed dead end. It is a virtual wanted poster that can now be cross-referenced against a global database of relatives. It's possible the culprit's own family, people who have no idea they are connected to this crime, may hold the key. A second cousin who took a DNA test to find their birth parents, a great-nephew curious about his heritage. Their simple act of curiosity could provide the thread that unravels this entire mystery. Success isn't guaranteed, but the pathway to an answer is clearer than it has ever been. There's a cautious but real sense of momentum for John Ramsey, and for a public that has never forgotten that little girl. This represents a profound new hope. The long arc of the moral universe is said to bend towards justice. Today, it's being pulled in that direction by the undeniable force of science. The question is no longer just asterisk, if asterisk the killer can be identified, but asterisk how asterisk it might finally be done. The science is here. The possibility of identifying a suspect through a relative's DNA is a proven reality that has solved hundreds of cold cases. But what do you think? After all these years of false starts, could a distant cousin's DNA test finally be the key to bringing justice for JonBenet? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay informed on this and other major cases, make sure to subscribe for more updates.